When I think about microphones, the first thing I generally think about is how do they sound? But the MKE 200 has come into the market, and really the advantages of this microphone aren't so much about the sound quality and more about the form factor. And when you look at the microphone, it's instantly obvious that Sennheiser is trying to do something completely different than all the other mini shotgun and mini on-camera microphones in the market today. And given how quickly this segment of the market is growing and how much all of those microphones look very similar, I think it was a very clever strategy. And the first thing you'll notice when you compare it to other microphones in its class is it just looks like a chubby little microphone, but when you measure the total width, length, and height, it is smaller when you include the shock mount in the other microphones than any other microphone in this class or in this category. And not only is it smaller than any of the other microphones in this category, even when they're not wearing their giant fluffy wind muffs, it's smaller, and it includes the shock mount and the first level of wind protection in this chubby little body. And that's what Sennheiser has really done to kind of change the game with this new little microphone. In fact, this microphone is actually shaped very much like a small version of what you'll see on movie sets. They're called blimps. They are actually a giant housing that you can put a microphone in. They have a thin layer of fabric covered by a sort of big furry windscreen on the outside, and then you would have a bare microphone inside of that. And what Sennheiser has done is they appear to have taken that same concept and that same design, and they've just implemented it into a tiny little on-camera microphone. And there's a couple things that this does, especially for me and my workflow and when I'm using the microphone. And the first one is, because it is an all one-piece rigid microphone, it becomes pocketable. Now, if I'm going to be going out and I don't know if I'm going to want a microphone or not, or if I'm going into a situation where I don't want the microphone on top of the camera, or I feel like it's going to be too obvious if I've got a microphone with a big furry wind muff on top of the camera, there's some situations I do not want to draw attention to myself by using something like that. I, one, can take this tiny little microphone and just stick it in my pocket. With something like the Rode VideoMicro, potentially you could do that. You would have to take it out of its mount. You would fold it flat, but in total, the Sennheiser is still more pocketable, even once you break down the little Rode VideoMicro. And once you've got both of these little microphones on top of your camera, the first thing that you'll notice is the Rode VideoMicro is here without its wind muff. It has absolutely no wind protection, and even in the sort of lightest of winds, you have to put on the wind muff, which makes this microphone much bigger and much more obvious. This little Sennheiser tends to be a little bit more stealthy. It's black, it sort of blends in with the camera itself, and it's first level of wind protection. So if you're just going to be using this in reasonably modest windy environments, you don't even have to put the additional furry wind muff that comes with the microphone on. So there's a lot of situations where you'd be traveling around and this is what your sort of Rode VideoMicro is going to look like, and this is what your Sennheiser MKE 200 is going to look like. So you've got a much smaller form factor, you've got something that's much less obvious, less intrusive, is going to draw less attention to you. And I can tell you it's taken me a few years to get used to when I walk around with the Rode VideoMicro or any of these microphones that have the little furry wind muff on them on top of the camera. People just stare at you. I don't know what it is. So if you're going someplace that you think you might draw attention to yourself by having a microphone or by using a microphone, the MKE 200 is going to have a huge advantage. Not only when it's on the camera and it is far less obvious, but the fact that you can stick it in your pocket and take it on and off the camera depending on when or if you need to use it. And the new form factor and shape of the MKE 200 is not where the innovation ends. They've actually set it up so that it has the cord coming out the front of the microphone. And that might seem strange at first until you think about how we use these sort of modern mirrorless cameras and these on-camera microphones nowadays. And if you look at the Rode VideoMicro, you have got the cord coming out the back. Now what happens is when you put that microphone on top of the camera and then you hold it up to your eye, you have got this cord sort of getting in the way of trying to look through your viewfinder. With the MKE 200, your back of the microphone is going to be virtually flush with the back of your camera and the eye cup, and then you've got the cord coming out the front. So this is a significant advantage as far as sort of the usability and using the eyepiece or the electronic viewfinder on your camera when you have got the microphone mounted on top of the camera. Interestingly, Deity with their D4 Mini has addressed this in a similar way. They don't have it coming out the front of their microphone, but they have it coming out the side. So these are some innovations and some ergonomics that people have obviously noticed since the Rode VideoMicro came out, and I would not be surprised in the future that we see a new version of this Rode VideoMicro implementing some of the innovations that these newer microphones have introduced to the market. Now, the MKE 200 is extremely lightweight. It is a all plastic build, including the hot shoe mount. I would have loved to see that be metal, but to be honest, it does not feel like it's going to break, and I haven't had a problem with breaking any of the cold shoe mounts on any of my other microphones that have a plastic cold shoe mount, so I don't think that is too much of an issue. Because the shock mount is internal on the Sennheiser MKE 400, I don't think it does quite as good a job of isolating handling noise when you compare it to sort of a traditional Ryko shock mount that these other microphones have. Now, keep in mind, something like the Boya actually has a rigid mount, so that does have quite a bit of handling noise problems depending on the camera and how rough you are with the handling of the camera. But the Deity D4 Mini and the Rode VideoMicro both have extremely good shock mounts, and even tapping on the camera doesn't send that sound through. But in defense of this Sennheiser MKE 200, I imagine when they were engineering this, they just worked out how much shock mount do you really need. And as far as genuine handling noise, when I'm using the camera and handling it in a way that I would traditionally shoot video, I am actually not getting any sound really coming through. If you do tap on the camera, or there's some way that there is a fair bit more sort of vibration or noise traveling through the camera, that does come through on the microphone, but it's not on a level that I think affects most people in the practical way that they actually would use a camera with an on-camera microphone. And so now I'm going to give you some audio samples both in the environment that I'm in here now in this office, and then we're going to go outside and give you an outdoor comparison of all the microphones that I've just talked about. And now you're listening to Sennheiser MKE 200. I've got it boomed just out of shot, and I'm just using an extension cord to run it straight into the camera. Now you listen to the Boya BY-MM1. This is the cheapest microphone in the comparison at $29.95, and it also has a rigid shock mount, so it doesn't isolate against handling noise and shocks as well as any of the other microphones. Now you're listening to the Deity D4 Mini, certainly one of the microphones that I recommend most for the sort of mini shotgun microphones, and this is a microphone that comes in at $49.95. And now you're listening to the Rode VideoMicro, certainly one of the most popular microphones in this category and the one that really started the category. And as a rule, I tell people Rode is a great company and you really can't go too wrong when you buy a Rode microphone. Now we're back on the Sennheiser MKE 200. We're going to take them all outdoors now and see how they sound in a sort of a real world outdoor vlogging type environment. What you're listening to right now is the MKE 200. It is approximately 3 feet away from me. Now I'm just going to cycle through these different microphones, and I'm always going to come back to the MKE 200, so it sort of cleanses your audio palette so you have a baseline to compare the next microphone to. I'm also going to stop the video component of this shot, and I'm just going to put a picture of the microphone, and I think that helps you focus on the audio rather than the distraction of the visual. But at the end of it, let me know if you think that's the way to go or if I should just leave the video component in. Now you're listening to the Boya BY-MM1. This is the least expensive microphone we're going to compare the MKE 200 to. It is a $29 microphone, and it's generally what I recommend if you are on the tightest possible budget. Now we're back on the MKE 200 once again, only about 3 foot away from myself. This is going to give you a reference point of how the MKE 200 sounds. Now you're listening to the Deity D4 Mini, and this is one of my top recommended microphones, particularly at the $49 price point. It has an additional input port in the side of the microphone. It's compact, deals well with wind noise, and is really an excellent little microphone at this price point. Now we're back on the MKE 200. There is a fair bit of both wind and noise around, and I'm hoping that's going to give us a pretty good idea of how good all these different microphones are at actually isolating my voice versus the sound in the environment around me. Now you're listening to the Rode VideoMicro. This is the microphone that really started this whole budget shotgun category, and this microphone always has very good audio quality, and although it was the first microphone in the category, I still think it is one of the best. So after reviewing that footage, the one thing that really stood out to me was how little wind noise there was with the MKE 200, and while the other microphones had a bit of a low level rumble. Now, it wasn't super windy, but there was a pretty consistent wind out there, and that made me wonder how much better the MKE 200 really is with this unique design. So I have done a little wind test. Now, having a look at this, just be aware that the little mini shotgun microphones are not designed to accept any wind at all based on the form and the way that they are designed. You absolutely have to use them with a little wind muff, or dead cat as they're called, where the MKE 200 is designed to handle sort of modest amounts of winds with this design and the form factor that it comes as without any wind muff on. And then if you want a little extra protection, you just put on this little sort of furry sheath. So as you can see, the MKE 200 was far and away the best microphone when it comes to wind. And I haven't really heard in any of the Sennheiser documentation or any of the reviews anybody really mention this, but it kind of makes sense because the MKE 200 is designed just the way a blimp, a professional audio blimp that is used to get the maximum clarity when you're in windy conditions. The MKE 200 is basically a miniature version of that design, so it completely makes sense. Who is this microphone for? Well, first of all, if you have problems with wind noise, or if you are operating in windy conditions a lot, I don't think it's even close. This microphone is so vastly superior to the other microphones. The second thing I would say is if you are interested in having your microphone be able to fit in your pocket and only come out and use it on the camera when you need it, and if you want it to be a little bit more stealthy where it kind of blends in with the camera and it's not so obvious that you're using a microphone, that is the other situation that I would strongly consider the MKE 200. The one thing we do need to keep in mind is the MKE 200 is a $100 microphone, where the next most expensive in this little roundup that we did is the Rode VideoMicro at $59, and then you've got the Deity at $49, and then you've got the Boya at $29. So it is far and away the most expensive microphone. So I think if you are buying this microphone, it is important that some of those attributes are important to you, particularly the wind situation if you really have a problem or you shoot in windy conditions a lot, or if it is important that your microphone is a little bit more stealthy, sort of blends in with your camera, and can actually be removed and easily fit in your pocket. I've got a whole playlist of reviews and comparisons to mini shotgun microphones, and I've just put that on screen now. And if you're having trouble making a decision about what is the best mini shotgun or mini on-camera microphone for you, be sure to check out that playlist because there's tons of good information in there, and I think we can help you make the best possible decision.